Everybody, welcome also to our program today. Happy summer solstice and welcome to the SAGA Award Winners Virtual Spotlight. My name is Megan Alves and I am the Marketing and Program Manager of the Artist Archives of the Western Reserve. So let me just make sure that everything is set up here. There we go, got it on both ends. So we have a wonderfully robust program scheduled today. So luckily for all of you, I won't take up too much time on the front end of the program, but here is just a few announcements to set the stage. First off, always important, we want to go ahead and thank our funders for their continued support and for making programming like this possible. Our funders are the Ohio Arts Council, Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, the Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities, the people of Cuyahoga County, the George Gunda Foundation, the Bernice and David E. Davis Foundation, the William Bingham Foundation, and the Zufall Foundation. Also, we want to extend a huge thank you to the Print Club of Cleveland, who generously sponsored these awards that we are highlighting today. In fact, I'm sure there's a few Print Club members out there in the ether, so thank you for joining us. So second, even though this program is virtual, it is important to take a minute to acknowledge that the land that the Artist Archives of the Western Reserve is built on, and the place that we call Cuyahoga County, is land that was claimed by the US government through force, displacements, and treaties negotiated in bad faith. We acknowledge those of the Shawnee, Miami, Erie, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, on whose lands we stand, and the thousands of Native Americans representing over 100 tribes who currently reside in Northeast Ohio today. Currently on view at the Artist Archives is, of course, the SAGA Fine Print Exhibition. Juried by Artist Archives Executive Director Mindy Tousley, who's on the call today. The show features over 50 artworks by the talented members of the Society of Graphic Artists, and then several of which we'll be hearing from today. So it's going to be a really full house. The show accompanying it is called Handing It Down, and that is a complimentary exhibition from the Jack and Linda Lissauer collection. And it features regional artists from Northeast Ohio who are also educators dedicated to handing down the traditions and the knowledge of printmaking to the next generation. Both shows are on view a little bit longer till July 1st, so we hope you pop into the archives to see it. Now, onto the program. Today, we are joined here by a full panel of prestigious guests, and it is my pleasure to introduce them all to you. First up, we have the president of SAGA, that is Diego Briceno. So Diego, thank you so much for being here today. It's a real honor.
Thank you. It's an honor for me to speak on behalf of SAGA, and thank you so much for having me here. I will speak very briefly about our history as an organization and our mission.
Oh, and then I'm gonna introduce everyone, and then I'll double right back to you, Diego. Sorry, I made that unclear, so hold that thought, please. We'll be right back for it. So, yikes. Next up, we have actually Mindy Tousley. So she is the exhibition juror for the SAGA show. And actually, though she's our executive director, we're going to have her speaking on behalf of the exhibition as a juror today. So Mindy, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Awesome. Next up, we have Dr. Emily J. Peters. Emily, so she is the curator of prints and drawings at the Cleveland Museum of Art and the awards juror for this exhibition. So Dr. Peters, thank you for being our fearless leader in the discussion.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And last but not least, we're joined by the award-winning artists themselves, which is Merle Perlmutter, Karen Whitman, Jayne Reid Jackson, and Cindi Ford. They are all amazing printmakers. Thank you all for joining us today, too. Thanks. And then finally, just to let you know, there will be a Q&A session at the end of this program. It is live. So if you want a question of any of the panelists, Diego, Mindy, any of the artists, Emily, what you can do is either type that question in the chat, the Q&A function, which is 2 little bubbles. Or if you want, you can actually raise your digital hand and we'll call on you and we'll be able to hear you out loud. We won't be able to see you. So if you're in your bathrobe, you're A-okay, but that way you can interact a bit more. And speaking of hand raise, if you have any troubles during the program at all, just raise your virtual hand or put a message in the chat. Kelly Pontoni, our collections registrar and resident tech guru, she'll swoop in and she'll help you. So Kelly, thank you so much for being here today and doing that. And then, all right, without further ado, see now when I actually got to throw it. So now it is going to be to Diego, who's going to tell us about SAGA, the history, and just kind of set the stage for what we're doing today. So now without further ado, Diego, take it away.
Thank you. The Society of American Graphic Artists has a very extensive history. In 1915, 108 years ago, we have the Brooklyn Society of Etchers was created. And our goal then was to educate the audience about printmaking as an art form. The organization grew considerably by 1947, where we had our largest exhibition. We show over 650 prints. And these prints were not only etchings, and that led to the inclusion of other techniques in printmaking, and we became the Society of American Etchers, Gravers, Lithographers, and Woodcutters. By 1952, we were SAGA, the Society of American Graphic Artists. By the middle of the 20th century, we were reflecting as an organization the diversity of the print media across the country. And since the 1970s throughout the 2000s, SAGA kept promoting the work of its members and honoring founding members who contributed to the functioning of the organization, and presenting to the national and international audience the latest on printmaking. Our mission is to promote the work of professional printmakings in the US, is to bring an audience the cultural relevance of traditional graphic arts, embracing the innovative spirit of printmakers in America. Today, we are setting up digital operation structures. And with this process, we have the opportunity to look back at our records and reflect on our purpose, and address important current aspects like inclusivity and sustainability. You can find more about our history and our programming at our website, sagaprints.com. And of course, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Emily, Mindy, Kelly, Megan, and everybody involved at the Artist Archive of the Western Reserve for making this possible. I want to thank Diane, our last president, and Jennifer, and all my colleagues at SAGA for working on this beautiful show, and to congratulate our incredible 4 artists here, Merle, Karen, Cindi, and Jayne, for sharing your process and part of your work with us, and to help our mission as organizations. Thank you.
Diego, thank you so much. It is just a true honor to hear you speak about this amazing organization and just to have you as a guest today. So, and also if anyone has any questions about SAGA, you can ask Diego during our Q&A period. I'm sure he would be happy to. So Next up in our beautiful schedule of events, I'm going to kick things over to Executive Director Mindy Tousley, who in this moment in this capacity is speaking as the juror of the exhibition. So Mindy, please, we would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Megan. And thank you, Diego. And, I just want to say that it was a real pleasure for me to jury this exhibition and see the level of quality by all of the artists who submitted, whether they were accepted or not into the exhibition. There were some parameters given to me by SAGA when I juried the show. There was a limit of 50 works, and that's because of the gallery space available at the archives. There was also a size limitation. I was instructed to include one work by each artist rather than show several works by a smaller number of artists, which is the other sort of option that you have when you're jurying a show from entries like this. So I looked at everything many, many times. I just want to tell the artists that I really looked at your work very closely. I looked at close-ups, I read the descriptions. So the work was selected very deliberately for the quality of the prints as well. I tried to include a variety of printmaking techniques when I was looking to see what I would have in the show. As far as subject matter goes, I did realize when looking at all of the work that there were artists who were sharing narratives, and I thought about that in selecting the work also. There were environmental concerns through depiction of landscape. There were fantasy narratives, fairy tales, cautionary tales, metaphorical stories. There were things that were sort of purely fantastical depictions of places that I think I would personally like to go to, if not in reality, at least in my imagination. There were science fiction landscapes. There were crystal aliens depicted in the science fiction landscape. That was sort of, I think I was surprised a little bit by that. There were urban landscapes with gritty scenes, including water towers. And those really spoke to me because of where I live in the Rust Belt in Cleveland. So, I think I related to that. There was humor, there was dark humor. There were modern depictions of the fallibility of humans and society in some of the prints, which is, I think, a traditional printmaking narrative, actually. There was portraiture, lots of wonderful depictions of people doing all kinds of things. Some close-up portraiture, some everyday, there's a print of a woman watering her lawn. So I like that. There's sort of a banality in the everyday life of people. There were abstractions, and they were of a very beautiful, delicate kind of nature, the ones that I picked, and they went together very well, I think. There were beautiful, realistic bits of nature depicted, stems and twigs, close-ups, birds and seeds, and a woman who showed us a beaver dam, and that had a really great composition. It was very minimal. I wish that I could show you all of you. I don't have the time, but I wish that I could have shown all of you at least one picture by each artist. And I could literally tell you, if I went through this show, why I picked each particular print. That's how this work spoke to me. And so I think, it's really important to know and remember that in the end, each piece was chosen individually because it did speak to me in some way. And I hardly could pick out a favorite in this show, I'll be honest with you. I would have loved to have shown you all of the work tonight. But I'm afraid since I couldn't show you all the work, you are just going to have to come to Cleveland. You have 1 week left to see the show. And hopefully Kelly will do a run through, and we'll post that on Instagram too in this last week. And just a reminder that the printmakers have made their work for sale. So all of the work is for sale in the show. And if you come and see it, maybe you'll find a favorite that you just can't live without. So thank you very much again, Society of American Graphic Artists Printmakers. It has been a delight to have your work in our gallery. And I hope that we can do something again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mindy. And again, Kelly Pontoni will be doing a walkthrough, so you can stay tuned to the Artist Archive socials to see when that happens. And then also that video will be saved, so you'll be able to see it later. So next part of the program, we're really excited to throw things over to Dr. Emily Peters, and who's going to curate this conversation with these amazing printmakers. So yes, please, Dr. Peters, take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Megan. Thank you to everyone. I want to say that, I was very happy to be asked to award the prizes for this beautiful exhibition. And the prizes were given on behalf of the Print Club of Cleveland. And those of you who don't know, the Print Club of Cleveland is over 100 years old. It's an organization that's affiliated with the CMA, the Cleveland Museum of Art, and has been supporting prints and printmakers and the Prints and Drawings Department all of that time. So thank you to them as well for having me participate in this project. So as Mindy said, such a strong show. I was just thrilled because obviously I love prints, and it was kind of like a catalog of prints, very instructive. I know a lot of students have been to the show. You could see everything there, from engraving to lithography to woodcut reductions, so many techniques represented. And as Mindy mentioned, also so many points of view. And I think it shows how rewarding an exhibition of printmaking can be, a contemporary printmaking. The 4 prizes went to 4 excellent examples of different techniques. And it wasn't my initial intention to do it that way, but in each of the prizes, I considered very carefully the really wonderful technical skill in relation to the final execution and subject. And so I'm really excited to talk to each of the artists. We'll talk to each individual artist for about 10 minutes each, and then we'll have a kind of a group discussion, and then we will ask for your questions. So let's start with Merle. We'll look at the first image. The prize-winning image has won first place. So Merle, congratulations on the award. Where are you? I don't see you there. Are you with us?
Merle, mute yourself.
Yeah, let me go grab Merle. Merle, go ahead and unmute yourself. There we go, perfect.
Yeah, she's in her studio. Hi. I want to show the print. First of all, she's in her wonderful studio with her press in the background, which is wonderful. I'm excited about that. I want to show her award-winning piece. It's called Taking Notes, and it is a soft ground assembled etching. So I was just really blown away by this image. There are several reasons to that. There's this kind of oddness to the distorted perspective in space. There's references to music here, to writing, to architecture. And all of this is kind of perfectly realized by these subtle textures and color shifts. There's a color shift here between browns and deeper blacks. There's meticulous drawn line here. There's broader tonal areas. And to me, the entire work had this kind of feeling of, if possible, like stillness at the same time as there was a vibration to it, which I just really responded to. And I've actually never really had the pleasure of seeing your work in person. And I was really taken by this assembled nature of the work as well. So obviously, I would love for you to talk a little bit about your process of making the work, the techniques you used, and this assembly. And if you could point out to everybody kind of where that takes place in the image, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, when you do printmaking, and as every printmaker knows, you take a lot of proofs because you're working blind, essentially. So you're taking a lot of proofs. And at a certain point, you realize that it's an excellent proof, but there's just a little corner that has to be worked on. So the proofs piled up. And then I wanted to say certain things that I was unable to do on the plate. Or it would have taken me another year to do on the plate. So what I did was take certain sections and cut them out and assembled them from the proofs that I already had of prints that you probably have already seen, and put them together in new ways, which gave me the opportunity to play a little more with the perspective and to play a little more with the design and to get an image that I might not have gotten in any other way.
Can you go back one, Megan? I'm sorry, Merle. Can you go back one? There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. On this one, there are, the piano was taken from one print, and the seated figure was taken from another print, and the background was taken from another print or two, and in the corner, another print. So, and then I play around with it, and it's been very gratifying because I can get things by taking a different route, and therefore the end result is different.
So essentially, also the different colors we're seeing are coming from different plates that you printed with the brown or with the black, and then you took from those the proofs that you made and assembled this image.
That's right. That's what I did. And I, with the black that I use, I always put in a little burnt umber and a little bit of blue, and that gives the black a lot of richness that you don't get when you just use plain black. So it helps with the all the halftones. So my work is like 99% halftones anyway. So you need, and you want a little variation to create interest and depth and just to make it beautiful.
Yeah, and
So,
you're using soft ground, correct?
yes, I use soft ground, and then what I do is I have very fine silks that I press into the soft ground, and I'll stop out each section. When I do the original plate, I'll stop at each section and go darker and darker, and you get 3 tries at the acid. 3 tries, it has a tendency to underbite and degrade. So you get 3 tries, and then you can come back with your 3rd try and create tonal variations by dipping certain areas into the acid or painting with the acid. And then in the end, you can come back and scrape very, very gently. I'm not much of a burnisher, but I will scrape very gently to get a nice gradation of tone along with the dipping. And
it's beautiful. It's absolutely masterful. So these areas we're seeing with the really fine texture on the piano and on the floor there, those are the silks, that kind of texture of the silk as well that we're seeing.
If you take a magnifying glass, you will see the texture of the silk.
I love that. I love soft ground because you can get some of those, those textile feelings it creates mood, I think, as well, especially in your work. So
I haven't done the obvious with soft ground, which is to put lace or plants or other things into it, because that becomes very dominant. I've just used it as for the tone that I can get.
And we have some other images that will give our audience an idea of some of the rest of Merle's work. I mean, you obviously are interested in architecture. Do you have a background or special interest in rendering architecture? Where does this come from?
It comes from just looking at
Mhm.
the shadows that creep across where you live. Of course, I don't live in this kind of architecture, but the shadows will creep across a wall or a staircase, and then I'll incorporate that particular section into my work.
Right.
And then assemble all the different sections into a finished piece, because obviously none of this exists. So
Right.
it's an imaginative, you know.
Yeah. And are you looking or thinking about any historic artists at all? Like, have you been specifically influenced by any? I mean, I think of like De Curico or these Italian surrealists. It kind of comes up for me when I see some of these things. Or is this just
I love them,
Merle?
you know.
Okay.
I love Briceno. I love Magritte.
Yeah.
I love so many artists, and I love some of the artists that just pure color, which I don't do, but I think that I sometimes think that my influence has been just being isolating myself completely and trying to find something that's unique to me. Everybody has something unique to say. I'm sure the show expresses that very well, all the different work. And so just to find something that's unique, and the many hours of just sort of watching the shadows change inside a home or a wall. It's observation.
Yeah.
Essentially, yeah.
And we all have this experience from coming out of the pandemic, all those hours in our homes, right? So I guess my last question, I mean, we could talk for hours, but is kind of, why do you think printmaking lends itself particularly well to your vision or to your subject matter, I guess, or to your concerns as an artist? Why printmaking?
That's a very good question. It sort of happened by accident, and you know, sometimes it's like a duck takes to water. Somehow the printmaking allowed me to express what I wanted to express. I think every printmaker has painted, has drawn, has done sculpture. We've done it all, but somehow this really clicked. And
yeah,
it's very hard to express why. None of these images would have worked in sculpture, although I love sculpture. And I think painting wouldn't have done it. Especially watercolor wouldn't have done it. Although I did lots of watercolors when I was young. It just somehow clicked. And I think that's what a lot of people, you know, they'll try a lot of things, and all of a sudden they're very successful at expressing what they have trying to say in a certain medium. So,
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to convince me. I think it's wonderful. I'm glad you're not a painter. This is just beautiful, beautiful work. And we'll come back at the end to some more questions, but thank you so much. It's, by the way, what about Escher? Have you ever looked at Escher?
You know, that's very interesting, and you're not the first one who said that, because he also curved space, and I curved space.
This one in particular, yeah.
But I found him after I started curving space. But I think that there are other people who do that. I know Karen also curves space, and so I find Escher's work fascinating. He curves it in a very different way. It's predictable. When you see one spot and you see his progressions, you'll know what the next progressions will be. I like to fool people so they don't know. If you look at one section, you have no idea of what the next section is going to be. So it's different. But I do see the certain similarities, and you're not the first one who's asked that question.
Okay.
So,
thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we'll talk a little more later. I want to move on to Karen Whitman. if we could look at the second place piece by Karen and say hello to Karen. This is
Hello.
Dreams Over. Hi, Karen.
Hi.
Dreams Over Brooklyn. So Karen's, this is a view of obviously of Brooklyn, and you know, it's a relief print and it's a linocut, which we'll ask her more about. And I mean, I loved just the kind of virtuoso quality of the line work and creating a composition which is essentially, she has to render space, she has to render volume, she has to render shape, all just with lines, right? And cutting things away. And I think that that's obviously, it's, to me, it's the kernel of the history of printmaking, but I just really appreciated that in this work. There's
Thank you.
and yes, and also, of course, I look at a lot of historical art, and it kind of, I've been looking at a lot of images of New York City that were made in the 30s and 40s. And I think that, of course, there's this resonance with those too. So Karen, you also brought some other images. You have a lot of city views. And I'm wondering, you know, let's talk a little bit about the subject matter, and then you can also please talk about the technique at the same time. But why do you keep coming back to city views? What is it that you are so interested in with the city view?
Yeah. Well, I've just always loved the shapes and angles, you know, those crisp lines of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And this medium is absolutely perfect for it. This is a lino cut. And, you know, there are so many, you know, light and dark contrasts in the city, lots of shadows and alleys and things, which I've always been fascinated by, and all the detail. And this is such a perfect medium to express all of that through.
Absolutely. Talk a little bit about the lino cut and how you came to that as your preferred medium.
Yeah, actually, I was a printmaking major in college, but I don't recall there being any block printing offered there. I'm not sure why. I had gone to State University at Buffalo, but I discovered the line of, but I took litho and etching while I was there, and I liked it, but it wasn't something that I ended up, you know, sticking with throughout the years. But then when I came up to Woodstock, I was introduced to block printing. That was around 1990. 1995, I think I made my first lino cut, and I realized that this was my medium. And once I discovered it, that was the medium I stuck with. In fact, I actually started by making color lino cuts, because I had come from a background of doing silk screen separations for other people's work, actually. And then when when I started doing the lino cuts, I was doing multicolor lino cuts, and I tried black and white one day, and I realized that was how I really preferred to work, because there was the challenge of making it work just with tone and form,
Yeah.
without the dazzle of the color.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, it's almost as if you can feel the color anyway.
Absolutely. And the classic
potential
challenge of the black and white, but you know, all of the, look at that one. Wow. And you have some beautiful patterns up here. So talk a little bit more about the themes in your work. I feel like there are some, besides the cityscape, there's some other recurring themes that you are drawn to.
Yeah, well, I do like to make narrative pieces that tell a story. This one in particular, you know, it was inspired by an intersection in Brooklyn, mainly just the thrust of the the intersection and the way it veered off in a couple of directions, and that really attracted me. But I changed all the buildings, all the storefronts, and invented the cars, and I put myself in there too. That's me, and with the hat in the foreground there. And I imagine that I've just, walked out of the taxi and maybe I'm headed to the diner. But I like to put little hidden messages all over my prints too.
Oh,
I think of them as whimsical, but but somehow, and I don't know how or why, they just end up looking a little spooky. That's what kind of pulls them all together. But they're kind of fun at the same time. But I have a lot of messages here, like these 3 cars in a row that go around this bend on the right. In the foreground, the license plate says "don't," and then the second license plate says "look," and the third one says "back." So I have all these little messages going on there. This says this way. This one says the other way. This
and how
one
big is about how big
here
is
you
this
are.
one?
Yeah, this one is about 34 by 24 by a little more than 34.
Okay, so
And I
when you are working on this block, do you start with a drawing? How do you go about the composition? Because that's what just blows me away about your work, is kind of the execution is beautifully planned. And so tell us a little bit about that planning process.
Well, very often it's from what I'm seeing in reality. Other times I'm, sketching various things, and then I put them together. But I look for a flow of the eye, and just see how one thing leads to another. I'll, add buildings, and, make sure that there are some taller ones, some shorter ones, but basically, just a lot of curves, a lot of shapes that lead your eye to move from one area to another.
So you actually work kind of organically on the block?
Well, I do have, I work organically on the original sketch, but once I have the sketch worked out, then I'll transfer that image to the block. And yeah, I just, I like it to be busy. I like to have a lot of people doing a lot of different things, or if it's not, sometimes the buildings themselves are the main characters, and I try to make them bend and twist, like
this one
here.
is, yes, very bendy and twisty. We're looking back at Merle's work a little bit too with that. Yeah, that's wonderful.
And this is completely from imagination, this one, but there are people who live in Brooklyn and look at it and they feel, they feel that it's Brooklyn somehow. And that I did use a reference for the Manhattan Bridge in this one. But other than that, I just took my favorite things like water towers and, chimney pipes and, curving streets. And I have a train coming through here, and I even have a Juniors of Brooklyn cheesecake truck on the bridge on the center right.
Like a puzzle.
And,
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have, do you have a way of rendering certain shapes that you use again? I'm just like really talking physically about the cutting. So if you're doing a water tower, you have a very specific way that you return to it again and again to create the curve and all of those. So you have this kind of vocabulary that you've developed over time, correct? Has it evolved, or has it stayed pretty much the same?
I think it's been pretty consistent from the beginning. Like I try to distort the perspective some, but I don't have a definite rule as to how I'm doing it. Much like Merle,
Mhm.
I just, if something's bending a certain way, you know, I'll find like, what's the angle that this piece is asking me to put on this building here, you know, to help to make it feel like it's dancing and moving and one thing's leading to another.
Mhm.
So that's pretty much it. I mean, very often it'll be just, you know, a basically straight kind of line, but I'll just curve it a bit here and
Mhm.
curve it out here, curve it in there. And when I feel that it looks like it's dancing and moving, I know that I have it right. It's all, you know, very intuitive and, you know, no real rules, but
Yeah.
I'm sure there are rules here that are being broken. But the less I think about the rules, the better it comes out, you know?
This one has some color on it too.
Yeah, this had a second block.
Okay, this is a color block. Okay, great.
Yeah, so it was 2 blocks. I had to carve the black one first and transfer the black line work onto another block.
Mhm.
And you know, then I had this identical line work on both blocks, but one of them I carved for black,
Yeah.
covered away everything that wasn't black. And then on the sepia block, I just carved away everything that wasn't sepia, but I had to keep in mind where did I want that sepia to show through in relation to the black.
Yeah. That's
And
beautiful.
oh, and by the way, I do have a little tropical billboard in the center there for tropical delight.
Oh
And
yeah.
and in the if we go back to the Dreams Over Brooklyn one, you'll see that I have tropical references in there too. In fact, in Fantasia on Brooklyn, there's a
There we
tropical
go.
poster too. So somehow I find it appealing to put something tropical in a cityscape. Yeah. There it
I
is.
can't get it away. Yes.
In that
Getting
tallest
it.
building on the left side, I've got like a little tropical waterfall and coming
great.
down the side of the building. And the curves of the bridge that are in the billboard itself lead into the curve of the umbrella that's on the balcony that's protruding from the building. So I like to play a little bit that way, you know, bring a relationship between the tropical and the city.
Mhm.
And if we
can
go
see
back
that.
to Dreams Over Brooklyn, that's all about her dream. She's lying there on the left there, the gal moon bathing, I guess you call it. That's Tar Beach up there. That's what New Yorkers call
Yes. Yes.
call that
Yes.
rooftop where you lay out your blanket and sunbathe or moonbathe in her case. And it's anybody's guess whether she's really lying there or, you know, is she just dreaming about the tropics, you know, on her favorite rooftop.
Wonderful. This is wonderful. All right, we need to move
Oh, and
on.
I just want to
Unfortunately.
quickly mention that I did this as a commission for the Print Club of Albany.
Okay.
This was
Oh, wonderful.
commissioned by them.
Okay.
So for
Well,
the
thank you so
2021.
much, Karen. This is just
Oh, you're welcome.
absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you so
Lovely,
much.
lovely to talk to you. I'm so impressed by those.
Thank you.
So we are now moving on to our third place winner, Jayne Reid Jackson. And let's look at hers and say hello to Jayne.
Hello.
Hi, Jayne. Coming to us from Madison, Wisconsin.
Yes.
Convergence. Now, the first thing we need to say about this print is that it is a mezzotint, and I love seeing mezzotints. I think actually our audience, although most of them are probably print people, might like to hear a little bit about what mezzotint is. If you wouldn't mind just giving everyone just a quick
Sure.
background to mezzotint, that would be wonderful, Jayne.
Yeah, that's the typical thing when you're looking at my work is to explain what it is you're doing. So what you do is you start out with I always work on copper, and you start out with a flat, shiny copper sheet, and you take a rocker, which is a curved metal blade that has little teeth on it. And then you rock that over the surface of the plate. It leaves a little line of dots. And you do that all the way across in myriad directions until your shiny copper is no longer shiny. It looks and feels more like velvet. Then your plate is ready to start the work. So I transfer a drawing onto it, and you start smashing down those burrs, and burrs are kind of similar to dry point is the most familiar thing, only I'm using millions of dots instead of dry point lines. So then I take mostly burnishers and I smash those burrs I just created to get my grays and my whites. So if you printed the plate up once it was totally rocked, and you'll go like in 48 different directions for a couple of days, and until it's finished rocking, it would print up totally black. And so you're building mezzotint is the Italian term from out of the dark, or manor noir. And so and it was originally invented like in the mid 1600s to reproduce paintings.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was used, to make art for the common man. And then when lithography and photography came along, it kind of died out of favor. And now there's more people doing it to create original artworks instead of reproductions.
It's wonderful to see. It's a very labor intensive process. All printmaking is. But it has the ability to achieve these really rich tones. And I kind of recognized in this work immediately that you were playing a kind of formal game. You were kind of, and tell me if I'm wrong, but you're choosing specific textures, specific shapes, and then of course the light to bring out the quality of mezzotint in a way. Is that accurate?
Yes. All of my pieces, I specialize in still life imagery, and all of my pieces have an element of glass in them because I like to play with that, the reflections and the distortions that glass can give you. And then there's also symbolism in the marbles that I use in the other pieces of glass, and there's always a natural element. These crab shells, this was actually just like one crab that I photographed from several different directions and then created the composition to make them appear like they're rounding up and threatening to these little marbles, which I consider like symbolic of the world or the feminine. And so what I like to do is just create a mystery and kind of a poetry, and not really pin down exactly what it is. I mean, you can look at it and see, oh yeah, it's a bunch of marbles and crabs, but you can also see something deeper in it. And so the Convergence is a 12 by 18 piece, and that's the largest plate that I've done with mezzotint. And when I was at a mezzotint festival in Russia several years ago, I saw all these wonderful international mezzotint artists and was inspired. They were all going bigger and making these huge pieces. And one way to do that was to combine smaller plates. And so after I had done this big one, I had created two smaller pieces to go with it. And then just termed it, because the crow is the different one. So I labeled it as the intruder. So in this context, then the crabs are protecting their things from this crow who's eyeing them greedily. So it's a way to, because it takes so long to create the plates themselves and to get more bang for your buck, basically.
Yeah. You want to reuse or riff off of something you've already done, or there's so many artists I know that'll create little tiny plates and then put
like 100 of them all on the press bed and print them all as one piece. And so I was inspired by some of the ways the other Mezzotint artists were working.
Oh,
to try to create
interesting.
bigger images. Yeah.
I know there's a lot of Mezzotint artists in Japan. Is that the primary location of the Mezzotint, the contemporary Mezzotint, or is there somewhere else that I don't know about?
No, actually, Europe has a lot. I'm the director of the International Mezzotint Society.
Yeah.
And we have like about 140 members, and they're all over the world. We don't have a lot in Japan. There's a lot in China and Taiwan, Australia. Russia has tons of Mezzotint artists in it, and all over Europe, Canada, Mexico. You know, it's just, it seems to be gaining favor with a lot of the younger artists because you're not using any chemicals to create your work. It's all labor.
Yeah. Lots of labor. Yeah.
Yes.
So did you come to Mezzotint as a way to express your subject matter and formal concerns, or was it the other way around? You had these kind of subjects that interested you, and then you found Mezzotint as the perfect way to express them. I guess kind of how did that work?
Yeah. I've always been interested in depth. And so just Mezzotint is the only way. I really love the way that you can suggest that there's something beyond what you're seeing. You know, when you look at one of these from across the room, you see something and then you're drawn into it. And the closer you get, the more of the detail you see. And then what I've been doing now with this particular one, there's a black and white version of this. And then I started converting some of these into color by just using the same plate and then dropping the color and just a la poupe and just carefully blending and wiping in order to try to get a series, an addition of color that look pretty much the same. It's kind of tricky, you know, so and then just trying to find colors that will actually hold that depth, because so many, once you start adding color, it kind of flattens everything out. You know? So I've discovered this kind of a green combination that I use a lot. And if you look at my work, you'll see repetitions of different colors that I'm using.
Wow.
So
these are incredible. And I know someone will ask this question, so I'm going to ask it.
Sure.
How long will it take you to do something like Convergence? What is your the hours spent?
Let's see, I'm rocking another 12 by 18 right now to prepare for another large one. And so far I have spent about 4 days doing 2 to 3 hours at a time.
Wow.
And I'm about halfway there. You rock it until you can't see the sparkle of the light anymore. And so it's almost there. So and because it's such a, people have trouble with carpal tunnel and that, so I use a rocker pole, so you can kind of do a motion like this instead of this. And so, but I still, after a couple of hours, you have to take a break and walk away from it. So try to do other things. And then, this zinnia is an example of, there's the black and white version and then the color version, and how you can just change the whole attitude of the plate just by, you know, throwing some color in there.
Wow. Gosh, so, these are incredible. Thank you so much, Jayne.
Sure, you're welcome.
Really excited to see more of that work. And then our final artist is Cindi Ford. Cindi received our Honorable Mention Award for her work, which, let's say hello to Cindi and look at the work, which is called Anecdote. Botanical Anecdote. Now, I thought this was very interesting to look at and to kind of consider both the subject and the way it was made, because it has this kind of wonderful layered feeling to it, Cindi. And you are mixing a lot of different techniques here. And one of them is called Mokahanga, which I'm sure people would be curious to hear about, as well as engraving and monotype. And I think that the use of the relief process for the figure and for the bird as this primary subject is so strong and bold, and then you beautifully layer the softness of these other textures and the layering that you do with the other techniques. So I love that. I find it kind of slightly disturbing, a little bit in that sense, in a good way. So I really responded to it, Cindi. Can you explain to our audience a little bit about how you mix these techniques and kind of what your goals are in doing that? I don't see Cindi.
Well, I really like, oh, I'm here.
You're perfect. You're great.
I'm up here. Do I click on this?
Nope.
I'm here.
Oh yeah, we can see you okay, Cindi. Just go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, you're perfect.
Oh, you're here? Am I here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I've always, for some reason, like mixing processes. And I'm not one to like draw out a big scene and just reproduce it. So I got into Mokahanga and engraving recently. Mokahanga maybe 5 or 6, 7 years ago, engraving 3 or 4 years ago. And I still do other processes, but I like the idea of starting something. I never know quite where I'm gonna go, although this was a botanical series. So I kind of started, there was ravens across the street, and there were lots of them. In the fall, they kind of grouped together. I used to do one. This is my granddaughter. They have chickens. So I've created this, but I knew I wanted to do something botanical in the background. And Mokahanga is they're both really tough processes, if you know about engraving or that, where I layered, you take sheena wood, I use watercolors, and I made them really subtly. There's reduction, and there's 2 or 3 blocks, I think 2 blocks on this one, where I created these botanical scenes underneath, kind of, because we're removed, there's just, you know, it's just a more botanical. I brought in animals. I'm still very narrative, intuitive in the way I work. So I kind of developed, but I really wanted it really soft in the background. I wanted that layered look. And by working with that, because watercolors in the back, so it's just a softer way of doing it to give that layering, even though I actually work really flat. But I like layering, working flat. It's weird because the other artists did all these dimensions. I thought they're beautiful. I thought I wish I could do that. But I really like medieval artists. I like the medieval botanical work, medieval engravings. I've always liked work that's just kind of comes at you. And so, yeah, trying to add layering to this. So it just kind of evolved. And the other part, the lines were like the monotype. It needed something else to pull it together. And I like monotype. I mean, I try to, like I said, I like mixing processes in. And I never know where it's going to end up. I'm not a planner at all, except for maybe the idea. And that's what I like about it. I think drawing seemed kind of boring to me, where I like problem solving. So sometimes I really mess up doing this way, but then something evolves. Sometimes something good happens.
If we could look at a few more of them, the images, can you talk a little more about the subject matter? Are these stories that you're telling? Are they supposed to just simply be kind of evocative or poetic? Or do you not want to talk about subject?
they're both stories. Well, I think they're stories, but they're really open-ended. You know, things kind of like evolve. Like this, I mean, I've even looked a lot like yard art. I mean, most of the stuff comes from somewhere. You know, this was St. Francis. And really the change just kind of happened and that needed that. Animals, these are stink bugs. Like I said, a lot of it's imagination. The background's all the Munkahanga, you know, reduction plus multi block. The bear was linoleum cut. So, and these were transfers. The stink bugs were transfers. So it's a matter of, they just kind of evolve, but it is from real stuff. I mean, like the St. Francis was when we were in Florida, and sadly enough, we were in Fort Myers. We went this year and it's gone. It probably was gone because of the hurricane. So, yeah, things just evolve. I mean, they are stories. They come from my life. Actually, it's weird because another St. Francis, but this one, the birds. I've ever been interested in birds, and I always.
Wonderful. I mean, and I think one of the things that Mindy also mentioned in the chat is you also
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay. All right. I think then we should I just wanted to mention to everyone, there's this beautiful layer beneath the relief. Maybe it's a single block that it's kind of got a sheen to it, which I thought was just really lovely in these works. So we are at the end of our time here, and I want to make sure we have some chance to take questions from the audience if there are any. So let's see if we have any questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'll emerge back from the ether. Hello, everyone. That was a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much, Emily. And yeah, I could feel all of these artists talking forever. They're just gorgeous with it. So let me, so if there is somebody, if you are interested in asking any of the artists a question, go ahead and raise your digital hand if you want to ask it out loud. Or if you want, you can actually type it in the Q&A function down at the bottom. So I see one here. Okay, so I see Joyce Ellen Weinstein has her hand, so I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk. And you can unmute yourself, Joyce, at your leisure.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome.
What is Mokahanga? What is Mokahanga?
That's for Cindi. Cindi, what is Mokahanga?
Oh, it's a Japanese process. Okay, it's a wood block process that if you looked at most Japanese woodcuts, that's how it's done. I use Shina wood, sometimes I use cherry, and it's usually work with water-based materials. You don't like roll ink on it. You use brushes and nori paste, and the watercolor goes into it, and then you use a Baron to bring out the color, and it takes quite a few times to get a good one, and then lots of times people do registration of multi ones. I do reduction plus multi. I don't do like 20 blocks, you know, because that's just not me. But it's a water-based way of working versus it's the water-based versus a European, Western oil-based, roll on the ink with a brayer. This is done by brushes and a Baron. You don't need a press for that part. I have a press, but that part, you do not need a press.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joyce. So I see another, there right there. I see Dorothy has her hand raised as well. So Dorothy, when you go for it, whenever you feel good, we got a question for you. So Dorothy, are you with us? Can you hear us? Not sure if Dorothy actually needs a question there. So, any other questions to ask out loud? Anybody would like to ask one of our printmakers a question today? Not yet. I actually see a fearless leader. Mindy has her hand raised. So Mindy, do you have a question for one of our people?
I do. I have a question for Merle. When Deanne Prozia was here, who's the former board president for SAGA, for the opening, she went around and she actually told me stories about all of you guys, which was really interesting in your prints. And so Merle, she said that you started doing the layered prints during COVID. And so I know you gave a lot of other reasons why you like doing the layered prints, but I wondered if you had started doing it during COVID because you couldn't, you couldn't get to printing or something. And then are you going to continue to use this layered technique with your older prints? And I think you have to unmute yourself. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Unmute, Merle.
Okay. Can you unmute her, Megan, please?
Yeah, I did a request. So Merle, go ahead and unmute yourself and you'll be good to go.
Still not.
Still mute. So go ahead,
Okay.
Merle. One of the joys of Zoom is we all figure out our lives, right? So
Yeah.
how about, okay, so Merle.
Merle, we can't hear you still. Yeah. Yep.
Here she goes.
There you go. Yeah, perfect. Go ahead and unmute.
Oh, darn.
Oh, it's not working.
Yeah, I asked her to unmute. Again, the
Got
joy
it.
of Zoom.
Yay.
Oh, there you go.
Yay! Yeah, now unmute me.
I started doing them actually when I had these piles and piles of
Okay.
proofs. And one of our members, Kathy Caraccio, and I have to give her credit, she had taken pieces and assembled them, but in very rigid manner. And I thought, that's really interesting. I could do that in an entirely different way and get different results that are unobtainable with the method I'm actually using now. So I had done this on and off for quite some time, maybe 5 or 7 years before COVID, but I was very happy doing them during COVID too. So,
Okay.
no,
That's interesting. I guess misinformation through stories passed around orally.
well, you wonder how accurate things really are
Yes, exactly.
by the time they reach us. So, but anyway, that's why I was doing it. I was doing it for quite some time because it's really very interesting. I recommend it to everybody.
It is very interesting. And I have to say, when I selected that work for inclusion in the show, I did not actually realize that it was done that way. And it wasn't until I was installing the work and I was looking at it like really closely and I'm like, wow, this has actually been assembled. And I counted the layers because as a collage artist, I was very impressed with them. So I counted like 7 layers.
Yeah, it's so meticulously done. It's really hard to, but then you see that little piece of the piano coming into your space and you see, oh, okay.
You can also do that with a shaped plate if you want to do a shaped plate. You know, if you want to bend something beyond, you can have a plate that's shaped out into the margins. But, you know, there's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say.
So awesome. Our next question we actually have from a mysterious person on Karen Whitman's screen. Karen's husband has a question. He's emerging from the background right now to ask.
Hi, everybody. First of all, this has been absolutely wonderful. I want to congratulate all the SAGA people in the show. And Diego, congratulate you for being our new fearless leader. And to Merle, my gosh, when I first met you in the 1980s, you blew me away with the work you were doing and your encouragement. I also see that we both use the same hair dye. And I just wanted to say, Merle, you rock.
Oh, thank you. And so does Karen. I've always loved Karen's work because I love the sense of humor in it. She's always got a little sense of humor where you can laugh. Very few artists.
Absolutely.
It's really wonderful. And the way you are very good at explaining art. It's very difficult to do that because I always say art is nonverbal communication. And most artists actually can just grunt at their work. I had a lot of teachers who could just grunt. It's very hard.
Yeah, well, this is the era of the artist statement, right? You have to try to hone that over the years. Yeah, Rick is actually a printmaker too. Yeah.
Great.
Printmakers everywhere today. I love this. I'm gonna squeeze another question in there real quick, which is that I have one in the Q&A for Cindi. So Cindi, would you talk about, it said, could Cindi talk about the anecdotes in her print? So I think it was just a little bit about what that refers to in the title in relationship to the image. Can you hear us, Cindi?
I don't think she can.
I don't think so either. So.
Stories, kind of, it's a story. I mean, anecdotes is a story. So it's about, like I said, I like doing the botanical, but I like having a story in it, but letting you guys decide what the story is. So they're stories, but they're kind of like open-ended stories, but it's definitely, the anecdote is a story. So it's a story.
I found it quite poignant. There's like a tension to it that I couldn't quite resolve. So I really loved that. And it was married perfectly with your technique.
All right, I got another. I actually see a question in the chat. It is from Jenna Sloan. So Jenna,
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I like doing something that there's a push and pull. Okay.
The tension there too. So, thank you, Cindi. So the question I see in the chat is for Karen. It's for Karen Whitman, and is Midtown Mambo 2 blocks?
Yes,
So
it is.
It is a 2-block print. Okay.
Yeah, I had to transfer the black image onto a second block, but cut the second block for the second color.
Okay.
But they had identical line work on them at the beginning. But just cut away something different depending on what needed to remain on the surface to take the ink. So yeah, so you have to carefully transfer the image, via a piece of acetate. It has to be mirror image on both blocks for it to print correctly. So you can't just print one block onto the other and have that work, because one will be mirror image and one won't. So you have to take a giant piece of acetate and then take that, turn that upside down and rub the ink down, but you have to lay it down very carefully if you want the colors to register. So, yep.
And then actually collections registrar, Kelly Pontoni, who is background, I believe had another question as well. So Kelly.
Yeah, I actually, this is kind of for anybody. So what are your thoughts about the digital age of printmaking? Using, a laser printer to carve a wood block, which is something that I've done, or a CNC to rock a plate, or a mezzotint. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. There's been an ongoing conversation among mezzotint creators about different methods to create the texture on your plate.
Sure.
And especially since the tendency now is to do like huge wall size. Over in Europe, they're doing like humongous wall size images and combining different techniques in order to create them. And so it seems that as long as you're revealing what it is you're doing and not pretending that,
right.
Oh yes, I hand rocked this whole 8-foot long, whatever, that it's acceptable as long as you're honest about your techniques.
So Would you ever do that? Would you,
Me?
you know, if someone gave you the option that they would, you know, rock your plate on a CNC machine, would you be up for it?
I don't think so, because I like my hand and everything.
Right.
And so it's similar to like paying for a pre-rocked plate. I know some artists do that because they have carpal tunnel, but I
Sure.
love the act of drawing and the act of creating, and I want that all to be in my hand.
Right. That's great.
Well, I
That's great.
go on. So
On that topic, SAGA, quite some time ago, had a submission of a computer print, and we had a long discussion on it, and we decided that's for another organization.
yeah,
So we accept certain printmaking, and the styles have evolved and grown, but we don't take photography.
Right.
There are photography organizations, and we felt it was different enough. The images were different enough, and the creation was different enough at the time that that's for another organization. And
Right.
that's where I don't know, you weren't too young to know, Diego.
let's throw to Diego for comments before we wrap.
Yeah.
Yeah, Diego, did you have a comment on that in relationship to SAGA before we bring it on home today?
Yeah.
Oh, unmute yourself.
Excuse me?
Oh, I'm sorry, that was
Okay.
for Diego. There we go.
Yes. This is super interesting because we are in a moment where there's like strikes of like writers because of the artificial intelligence. It's all kind of like tied together, and here it's not in the future, it's already here. So what is very interesting about SAGA, that SAGA somehow has like a very unpretentious approach to gather artists and to promote them as a collective of artists. And in that doing, in several occasions throughout the century of history of SAGA, this specific topic had to be discussed, and decisions had to be made. I mean, the biggest proof of that is that it was an etcher club that then became the Society of Lithographers and Woodcutters, and in the after the Second War, with all the technological improvements and inks and big formats and color and abstraction, SAGA, there's like records, very interesting records, especially for scholars. Like we keep them because we think that they are very, very valuable. Again, to admit new techniques and to draw frames to let these people working on diverse techniques to have access to this platform, because we are like a big organization. So like being inclusive is part of our history, but it's also a huge labor of us talking about it. And right now we are approaching this like new age where we probably have to have several talks and take all the time of the world to see resources. Right now we are, whenever we get new members, we do have instructions that they could be making part of their prints with new techniques. That is kind of how we are handling this now, but a larger percentage of their image creation has to be in the traditional techniques that we cherish as an organization. It's very fascinating and complex because there's a lot of people studying printmaking and prints from different angles, and we are a very, we are artists. So it's like we all have a personal way of understanding printmaking, and whenever it gets a little conceptual, it's hard for us to arrive to one place. But I think that like we will redefine who we are in relationship with this, all of these new technologies and printmaking.
That's perfect for sort of an encapsulation. So we're over on time, but we're so grateful. There were so many good questions from everybody. Emily, anybody closing statement, Emily, before we close it for the night?
I don't have a closing statement. It's just to thank everyone so much. And it was just an outstanding work. And it was a joy, real joy to connect with all of you. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being part of the program. We put the links in the chat for all of the artists for SAGA as well. Those links are also available on our website, so artistarchives.org. And a whole video of this conversation will be available on artistarchives.org, usually within a week. We all wear 1 million hats, so I will be editing with one hand while putting links somewhere with another, and we will get it on there, I promise. So, and then also, yes, please look up these artists, be involved, and the best way to support artwork is to buy it, right? Or at the very least, to send them your love. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, every artist, for this wonderful night. Thank you to our supporters. Thank you to Karen, to Jayne, to Cindi, to Merle, to Diego, to Emily, to Mindy, and to Kelly. And I hope everybody has a really beautiful evening, and happy summer solstice, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Don't forget to
Thank
take the
you.
survey
Thank you.
that comes up at the end. Survey comes up at the end. We depend on that. Thank you.
That's right, what Boss Lady said, survey at the end. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful
you.
night,
Thank you.
Bye.
everyone.